Hello there, kia ora. Christchurch has had its fair share of tragedy over the last 20 years. It's the site of the most destructive earthquake that the country has seen this century, and the most violent attack of terrorism our country has ever seen. And there's no way that those events don't impact the collective psyche of the people who live there. They can be events that bring people and communities together through tragedy, and sometimes they can be events that lead to people who want to focus on creating divisions. And the Christchurch race has people like that. It also has the most high profile candidate in the entire country like that. The Christchurch race also has possibly the most coordinated, connected campaigns from right leaning candidates. They offer very similar outlooks, often on fairly cosmetic issues, and are all pushing for one choice for mayor. Like Wellington, there's a right-leaning local media outlet which has a wide reach due to its localised nature, and like Auckland, Waipa, Hamilton and Wellington, there's a loose alliance of independently together candidates called independent citizens. And like those other groups, there's at least one candidate who's raised some concerns, which should make voters ask what the vetting process was and how others in that group feel about being associated with their beliefs. Because for some voters, that will be a red flag in itself. Now, quick disclaimer, these are my red flags, and I know that as a dedicated lefty that they're definitely not going to be red flags for everyone, so please do some digging and check the candidates yourself. See if they share your values and the vision for the place that you call home, and none of that is going to matter if you don't vote in this year's local body elections. You should have your voting forms with you by now, and if you don't, check out vote.nz to make sure your details are up to date, and then check out the council website for how you can go about casting a special vote. Within a week of nominations closing, I had over 100 messages asking me one question. How on earth can Phil Arps be allowed to run for mayor? He is, after all, a white supremacist who has a conviction for sharing the footage of the Christchurch massacre, who once delivered a severed pig's head to one of the mosques where that happened, whose bail conditions included no contact with any Muslim without prior approval from his probation officer. He's had more than 30 other convictions. He had a business with Nazi-themed branding. He was arrested on his way to the illegal Wellington occupation because media reports that he'd told people on the way that he intended to hold public executions there and threatened to kill the public and police who got in his way. There's a very, very long list of behaviours that many feel should disqualify him from running for the position. And he incorrectly spelt the word independent on his profile for this election. But the laws that disqualify a candidate are actually generally based on if they've been caught breaking electoral law, or they're a non-discharged bankrupt, or they're unable to vote because they're not mentally capable of doing so. None of which are currently applicable here. And the report that actually recommended potential changes in this area was thrown out by Simeon Brown for being woke. So that's not likely to change anytime soon. Then you've also got Thomas Healy running for mayor. He's been known to share content from conspiracy theorist New Zealand First List candidate Kirsten Murfitt, shared content about chemtrails and weather modification, pseudo-law group challenging council's content, reality check radio content, anti-vaccine content, content questioning man-made climate change. He supports Barry Young, the man who stole that Health New Zealand data on COVID vaccines, and he enjoys a good chat with the former director of the New Zealand National Front and neo-Nazi Kyle Chapman. Also, and this is true, the security person for Julian Batchelor's Stopco governance tour. Then you've got incumbent Phil Major, who seems to have this history of making unilateral decisions with a she'll be right attitude, sometimes with what seems like valid reasons and the best of intentions, like how in 2020 he took it on himself to start digging drains to alleviate flooding that residents had been asking for help with from council for a while. But in 2021, there was a text to outgoing Christchurch Mayor Leanne Dalziel about his son wanting to build a TV studio, which came across like a conflict of interest. Or when he contacted an organic waste company that staff directly have communications with when he's not supposed to because that goes outside official channels. There was calls that he made to Simeon as well fairly recently, well I say recently, 2023, when he was Transport Minister, saying Christchurch doesn't need the road funding that you've earmarked for us, almost $1 billion in sustainable transport funding. And he claimed that it should have gone to the Hawke's Bay for the Cyclone Gabriel cleanup, almost a year after the cyclone had hit. But then he was given funding for a specific bridge repair that he wanted and further investment into a road of regional significance, neither of which are targeted at sustainable transport options like buses or cycling or walking. and neither of which had the value that you would have been seeing spent within the Christchurch economy. They just cater to car drivers. It comes across like a bit of an old boys club quid pro quo from the outside. And considering so many right-wing candidates in Christchurch are calling for and promising transparency while endorsing Major, that is a bit of a red flag right there. You've also got Nikora Nitro. He's also got a long list of convictions as well, including soliciting sex from a teenager in exchange for money, cigarettes and a cell phone top-up. He ran a cafe without a license or food safety certification, set up massage tables inside that cafe and advertised it as a male cruise club. He was linked to a fake mental health clinic that prompted a police complaint after he allegedly propositioned a client. He helped set up a youth charity which had links to the sex industry and seems to have left a trail of business owners and staff around Christchurch who say that they've been ripped off by him. And then you've got Peter Wakeman, who shares a ton of pro-Russia propaganda from creators cited as being Russian propagandists by disinformation experts. In fact, his was the first profile I've ever come across for a candidate that has this Facebook warning, saying that the post contains links to a publisher under editorial control of the Russian government. Now, most of the council races are either relatively small here or already settled, since 7 of them saw people elected unopposed across every place that you could run in Christchurch. And again, there was no corresponding vilification from groups like Hobson's Pledge or the Taxpayers Union, like they did with that one Māori ward councillor who got elected unopposed in the Waikato Regional Council. Again, weird. Anyway, in one of those tight races, Innes Ward, is Ellie Jones. She's actually being supported by Voices for Freedom aligned members of the Concerned Ratepayers Canterbury group, in the hope, in their words, of being able to influence her if she's elected. In Hallswell Ward, you've got Andre Moore, who signed on to one of the 3 taxpayer union pledges, and Dylan Smart. Now, Dylan is a member of that independent citizens group, that right-wing ticket who all back Phil Major for mayor. Dylan's social profile follows pages pushing hard right white identity ideologies like Reform UK, Restore Britain, and Trad West. And in a now deleted post about speed bumps, he was quoted as saying, "Our local and central governments have turned outward. Everyday concerns like fixing the roads, easing living costs, and supporting local jobs are put aside for UN climate targets, anti-colonization initiatives, mass immigration, cheap imported labor, and the ideology of the far woke left," which should be some really big red flags for people right there. In Riccarton, there's actually a great example of the same problematic phrasing, dog whistle, that shows up in a lot of candidate profiles from around the country, from those with links to disinformation and AstroTurf networks, which highlights why it's such a ridiculous phrase, to be honest. Both Debbie Morra and Tony Simons use the phrase common sense to describe what they bring to the table, which I'm sure they would both agree means slightly different things to what the other believes it means. After all, Debbie didn't sign the Taxpayers Union pledge and Tony did. Tony got upset and had what one comment described as a pearl-clutching moment when the story came out in the press. Well, this one here, because even though he isn't mentioned at all, he happens to be campaigning on similar issues that have been identified by Voices for Freedom local groups as hot-button issues that they can assimilate and manipulate to spread their message and increase their reach, because they are legitimate concerns for some voters. But there's no evidence that he is being backed by local Voices for Freedom members. Unlike Debbie Morra, who was the candidate of choice for local Voices for Freedom Telegram channel members in the last election. Again, neither of which is proof that either candidate is directly connected to Voices for Freedom or disinformation groups. But it does show that common sense thinking is not the sales pitch a lot of candidates think it is. After all, if you were using common sense thinking and you were upset about how similar your campaign is to one being influenced by disinformation groups and wanted to make sure that you were different from them, you'd probably not be sharing content from a reality check radio host like Tony did. And you'd probably read the questionnaire from Fluoride Free NZ asking if you would support pressuring the government to accept the New Zealand First Members Bill to repeal the ability for the Ministry of Health to make decisions on water fluoridation with a simple yes or no like they were asked to, and not then given a long written answer about your opposition to fluoride in general like Debbie did. That's why, for me, any candidate like Terry Craze or Ben Yorston in Spraydon, Ben Spittle in Waimairi, Evan Baker in Linwood, and Brian Brodie in Riccarton prick my interest, because common sense is a nebulous promise that means nothing on paper, but sounds good in a soundbite. And then wrapping up Riccarton, you've got Sam Yao, who also signed that TPU pledge. Now, speaking of Ben Yorston, who I just mentioned before, the common sense one, he calls playgrounds woke and boring. He also uses the ACT party line about there being a war on cars, and his plan to reduce travel times seems kind of at odds with his plan to put more buses into the main traffic routes instead of giving buses their own dedicated travel spaces, which means less vehicles in the traffic for those who do want to drive and better transport options for those who don't want to drive. And while he knows climate change is real, he opposes fluoride in the water supply. In Heathcote, there's Ian Kearney. Now, he's both a former member of both National and ACT, and he's been targeted as a candidate local Voices for Freedom groups see as aligned with their views. He was promoted by the Voices for Freedom run Concerned Ratepayers Canterbury group, and he was invited to a meeting with the Voices for Freedom Christchurch members where he told them that he had watched the Voices for Freedom media piece Managed Out, on the recommendation of Voices for Freedom's Elizabeth Munt, which resulted in that group feeling like he was keen to learn more about them and should get their support. It looks like he's not Voices for Freedom, but locally, Voices for Freedom see him as someone on the same page on the issues that they feel are important. Now, for the community boards, damn Christchurch, you have a lot of these, and 4 of them were actually part of those 7 elections that were won uncontested. In Fendleton Ward, you've got retiring councillor James Goff. He's been known to share content from right-wing AstroTurf group, the Taxpayers Union. In the Burwood Ward, you've got Mike Gibbs. He was actually on the leaked list of Voices for Freedom members that came out a couple of years ago. In Hornby is Sarah Brunton, an active Voices for Freedom member. She wanted to talk to one of the boards actually about equity and inclusion because of her Voices for Freedom links, which set off this really weird chain of events that led to the board chair stepping down from the role. She was a co-signatory on the Council Watch New Zealand letter to the Prime Minister, Foreign Affairs Minister and then Health Minister, demanding that the country never enter the WHO pandemic treaty, and she made headlines as being the person who chased down Dame Jacinda Ardern's car at a school screaming evil at her. In the Riccarton ward for the local board, you've got Brian Brodie, who made headlines last year for complaining that women's only sessions at local pools are discriminatory against men. Thus, actually some of the most popular sessions in the pool facilities, and according to the council, are used by women who want increased privacy and a sense of safety, greater confidence in a woman-only environment, a place to spend social time with female friends and family, or for religious and cultural beliefs, and were created after substantial community feedback in favour of the option. And they are actually covered under the Human Rights and Bill of Rights Act as a special measure for positive action to achieve equal outcomes with others in society. Then you've got Helen Broughton. She was that ousted community group leader. She's been known to share scams online that use well-known people's faces to sell sham products. There's Lucy King. She's a member of the Concerned Ratepayers Canterbury Telegram page, posting content that praises local Voices for Freedom Regional Coordinator Aaron McLaughlin's presentation on local water done well. She's part of the Save the Selwyn Huts Telegram page, a supporter of rates caps, and shared some COVID vaccine dog whistles like this one, which looks like it's all about Pfizer misleading the public, but was actually a regulatory change to ensure more detailed descriptions of who is at risk of myocarditis, how often it occurs, and what the follow-up data shows. And then finally, you've got Greg Luxton, who has friends in the global freedom movement and attended the Upskilling for Local Government workshops by Voices for Freedom connected Elizabeth Munt. Christchurch is an amazing city, and after some very dark chapters, it's starting to really see its potential unleashed. There's some brilliant facilities being built there, there's some amazing forward planning happening, and there's a lot to love about the place. And on display with so many candidates, there's passion for people and communities that not only call Christchurch home, but who can see new ways to unlock an even more vibrant future for everyone there. Voting is going to be done by postal ballot with voting forms hopefully already in your hands. Christchurch City Council uses first past the post for voting, so you need to tick your preferred candidate, and the future of Māori wards is not on the ballot here since Ngāi Tahu prefer a different representation model. You can find more information about your local elections, like where to put your ballots and how to return them, how to cast a special vote at the Christchurch City Council website, and for more general election stuff you can check out my website, paultheotherone.com/LG25. Hey, thanks for checking out today's video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe so you get more updates as we go along. We deal with these guys for the rest of the year.